Do you really think that every single person that the law or that police arrest is always in the wrong? Because if you do, then you're a fool. And let me repeat myself, you are a fool. But I'm not calling you a fool because you think like that. I'm calling you a fool because you've been tricked. You've been deceived to think that people like me, a young black African American, should always be seen as dangerous, menacing, that you always need to be on guard around them. We've been mistreated and misrepresented for so long, and even the law hurts us in many ways. So what I want to talk to you all about is a critical error within the justice system, which is false incarceration for young black teens. I want to start off with a case mostly everybody knows, the Central Park Five. It's a well-known case how about 30 kids went into Central Park during the evening. They weren't doing such good stuff as they were beating up some people, like a taxi driver, a male white jogger, and an old person carrying groceries. However, that is not as serious as the crime they were charged for. As once the police caught most of them, took them down to the precinct and did thorough interrogation, they let most of them go after, until it came to these five. Because by the time they were supposed to be letting go, the police were tipped off that during the same night, a white woman was raped and thrown in the side of the bushes. So, what would be easier to do than to find a real perpetrator was to pin the crime on them. They were forced to stay in the precinct for more than 24 hours with no food, nothing to drink, and no chance to sleep, getting constantly interrogated, re-asked questions. They were forced to forge testimonies just so that way the police could pin the crime on them and move on. And it's unfortunate that they had to serve as a group 17 to 13 years inside of prison where they don't belong. Now, eventually, the real perpetrator came out, confessed his crimes, and they were let go, and later on became the exonerated five. However, this is not even the first time in history this has happened before, as people like Ronnie Long, Clarence North, and the rest of the Scottsboro boys were all charged with rape against a white woman. However, it's not always about a sexual assault case, as with this next victim, Khalif Browder. He was 16 years old by the time of his arrest. He wasn't that bad of a kid. He was all right. However, the crime he was charged for was beating up a person and taking their backpack. And the punishment he received is not as serious, does not belong with the crime. As he spent 1,100 days in Rikers Islands, 700 of those days were mostly spent in solitary confinement. It was either two options each day he's in there: to join a gang and fight people, potentially killing them, or to not jump people, but possibly be jumped himself by said gangs. And he shouldn't have need to fight for his survival. That really caused a mental strain on him to the point where by the time of his release, 2 years after, he ended up committing suicide on June 6, 2015. And it's unfortunate how common this is for us to be arrested. Because if you look on the right, that's the majority of the white population. Not all, but the majority. And then you look towards a little down, that's the black population, about 10%. But as you begin to look more to the left side of these graphs with DNA exonerees and the prison population, you can see the disproportionality with the charts. you can see how much more the black majority starts to rise while the white majority starts to get lowered. And these numbers shouldn't be this way. These numbers shouldn't be this uneven. Which is why we need to really reevaluate everything, starting with the law enforcement. Because not all police officers, but some, use their power to their advantages, use their powers to put people underneath them, doing warrantless searches, false arrests, and violating our rights. It's completely insane that some of them are able to get away with this, and we can't do nothing. It's completely insane how this is seen as common. And even then, after they're arrested and hopefully taken to court, we still face struggles inside of the court of law. As you see, the black population is the majority of the most incarcerated prisoners out of everyone else in that graph. And that's not even the only thing, because the jury is another struggle we have to face. Because the jury you see right there was the same jury that faced Emmett Till's murderers. And you can assume what happened next. They let him go scot-free. Now, there's been a change in more recent times how the jury's starting to get more diverse, which is better, but it's still a struggle. And even then, there's one more factor, which is the public defense attorneys. Now, don't get me wrong, public defense attorneys are amazing. However, with so little of them it makes it hard for them to get to every single body. And that's what makes it difficult for some people to really have a lawyer to defend them in court. Because with too much work piled onto them, they won't have a chance to get to everybody. And once they're arrested, they're either going to be spending years in prison or could be put on death row. Marcellus Williams and Troy Davis are two of many names of people who have been killed and found innocent later, after their deaths. That same electric chair you see is the same one Ossining had for the longest time, killing off inmates when they were put on death row. So, you're probably wondering, how can I help? What can I do to try to prevent this fate? And I'm glad you asked. Because organizations like Right on Crime and the Sentencing Project are two of many organizations willing to fight against this system. And even if you don't want to work with any of the organizations, you still have a phone. You can still pull out your phone, post their stories so that more people can realize how messed up this is. You can go protest. You can learn your rights. You can even follow this movement called prison abolition, which is the whole movement to destroy the old system to create something new and better. So, I hope that for everybody here, before you leave, I want you to think how much power you have. Because even if you're still one person, you still have a voice. So let's speak up, reopen stories that's been closed. If a case looks too shady and if details are missing, let's speak out against that so they'll re-look into the case. Let's not let their lives be in shambles because of something they never did. Thank you for your time.